Are you just pointing at the problem, or are you becoming part of the solution? I'll make a shorter video of this for my social media. I'm doing this series called I'm Not Your Pastor. And the point is just I'm not a pastor. This is me walking around with my cows, sharing thoughts. I've always kept journals and just write down things I'm learning and what I believe, my principles, my conviction. And since I've been back on social media sharing again, I've been writing a lot, because I'll post things that I later sort of think, man, I shouldn't have done that. Or I'll comment, I'll get sucked into an argument and I'll comment something and something doesn't feel right. Like this principle inside of me, the things that something feels off. My parents didn't raise me that way, I guess. And I'll sit down and be thinking about it. And before you know it, there's some sort of, scripture says this, and I didn't act that way. And so I write it down. Now I mess up a ton. People who know me, I always really feel, I'm stuttering through this, I know. Whenever I post something on here that's like Bible says, scripture says, man, I think of all the times I've messed up. I guess that's the enemy. I think of the times I mess up and the things that make me unqualified to share this, because I can see the faces of people that I have hurt, things I have said, things I have done. I've made mistakes. So I start these with the disclaimer, I am not your pastor. I'm not trying to be something I'm not. I'm walking around out here in the woods with my cows, and I'm sharing with you some insight, some things that guide me, so that when I do make mistakes, I don't keep making them. Every week I try to share an I'm Not Your Pastor video. Last week I shared about 3 filters that I had put in my journal that I try to run things through before I share them on social media. It could apply to any interaction in life. You can be at a dinner party with some friends and somebody try to pull you into an argument that you really shouldn't be in. Last week, I shared a video about one of them. This week, I'm going to share about filter number 2. Am I just pointing at the problem, or am I becoming part of the solution? It's easy to feel like, especially in our culture, it's easy to feel like we're accomplishing something by just pointing and making a bunch of noise and making sure everybody else sees what is wrong. But most of the time, we're just adding to the noise. Being loud and being helpful are not always the same thing. When I first started thinking about this, it was because I was seeing things on social media that bothered me. Sometimes even Christians, pastors, artists, saying or doing things that really bothered me. And I wanted to make a post and point it out. I wanted to go, I can't believe this guy just said this. I've made some videos like that and then deleted them and sat on my porch and just go, what is it? What is it about? It's wrong. Like what I see, I do believe is wrong. And at the same time, I don't feel like I'm supposed to be spending my time making content, telling everybody how wrong Pastor so-and-so is, or how wrong the culture is, or how wrong this thing is. As I was sitting on my porch thinking about it, I started thinking about the Good Samaritan. So that's what I wrote in my journal. Am I just pointing at the problem, or am I becoming part of the solution? And beside it, in parentheses, I wrote the Good Samaritan. We all know the story of the Good Samaritan. I was raised in church. I'm a preacher's kid. I know the story of the Good Samaritan, and I know the lesson that's taught is there's a man, he's been beaten, he's been robbed, and he's left in the street to die. And along comes a priest, a religious leader, and he walks by on the other side of the road, he walks by. And then a Levite, and a Levite is like, today he would be church staff. You know, he'd be a worship leader. He'd be he's church staff. He comes and he walked closer, but he still walks by. And along comes the Samaritan. Now, this would have caught people off guard, because if anybody would have helped, it would have been the priest or the Levite, not the Samaritan. But the Samaritan is the one that helps. He picks the man up. He takes him to get him help. He pays for all the help. And he goes on his way. But as I was sitting there on my porch thinking about what the Good Samaritan did, how he helped, I also thought about what he didn't do. He doesn't build a platform and spend his time and his energy talking about the violence in the street. How have we gotten here? The leadership in our community has allowed violence in the street to take over. It's not a safe place, and we should do something about it. We need to change our leadership. Now, he also doesn't make it his mission to point out the hypocrisy of the religious leaders. These guys just walk by. They're on social media saying things they shouldn't say and doing things they shouldn't do. The Good Samaritan isn't spending his day making comments about how terrible they are or creating content about the hypocrisy in the church. The Good Samaritan doesn't spend his time doing that. The Good Samaritan helps the person in need. I believe our culture thinks that pointing at the problem is the same as helping. Do you agree with me that complaining about what is wrong is not the same as doing what is right? Jesus doesn't say, go and complain about the problem. In our culture, that's what we do. We just talk. We run our mouth and we point at the problem, but no one's actually doing anything. We feel like we're doing something because we're making noise. We talk about the problem. We point at the hypocrisy. We comment. We post. We argue. We blame. Meanwhile, there's a person dying in the ditch. In Luke, when Jesus is telling the story of the Good Samaritan, when he's explaining what the right thing to do looks like, he says, in Luke 10:37, he says, now go and do likewise. Don't just complain. Don't just raise awareness. Don't just point at the problem. Go and do. I feel this conviction as I'm sharing this. I started yesterday. Yesterday, someone got on one of my old I'm Not Your Pastor posts, and they, hit me with some ding, some like, you don't know what you're talking about, and they hit me with some nonsense. And I got on there and I wanted to say, yeah, you sound so smart. Let me explain to you, there are two kinds of wisdom. There's heavenly wisdom and there's earthly wisdom. And just because you have this earthly wisdom, you're still it's like I want it, my culture, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm ready to get into that fight. I've got the little zinger, the little one-liners. Who am I helping? Who am I helping by getting into a fight with some guy who doesn't? I've already said in the video what Scripture says. And this guy is telling me, he's arguing with me. He doesn't want to hear the truth. He wants to believe earthly wisdom. And as I started to just nail him, I hit delete. And I thought, how is this helping? Instead, I said, hey, I shared what I think about this, my thoughts on this. I shared in the video. Watch the video again. If you still disagree with it, you disagree with me. That is the good thing about social media. We don't have an excuse. Like, you don't, if you and I have had a personal interaction and I have said something sharp that stung, I got to come back later and say, I'm sorry. On social media, if you are sitting with your phone on your computer and you are taking the time to type out an argument, to be louder than everyone else about what's wrong with the world, we don't have an excuse. Time is going by as you are typing. You get to reread it before you hit share. You can delete it after you created it. What's our excuse? Before you comment, before you post, practice running it through this filter. Am I just pointing at a problem? Or am I becoming part of the solution? Instead of complaining about this content that I see, that I don't like, can I create content that aligns with my principles, with my convictions, with Scripture? If I don't like what's happening in my community, if I don't like what's happening at my church, instead of going around and having dinner with friends and complaining about it, making sure everybody knows what's wrong, if you think there's a need, if you think there are kids hurting, if you think there are young girls who could use help, young boys who could use help, if you think that there are marriages in your community that need help and your church isn't doing anything about it, can you believe it? Can you believe it? Could you create an after-school program? Could you start a Bible study for young couples at your church? The Good Samaritan doesn't go around saying there's violence in the streets and no one's doing anything about it. Not even the church and the church leaders. They're not doing anything. He doesn't do that. He just becomes part of the solution. He just becomes part of the solution. And Jesus says, go and do likewise. Go and do. Become part of the solution.